Wait, I'll take it off, she said, her fingers trembling as thunder crashed outside the ranch house. But Gideon Blake misunderstood her meaning entirely, his weathered hands reaching instead for the storm-soaked shawl draped around her shoulders, and that night changed everything. Lila Mae Carter's breath caught as his calloused fingers brushed against her bare skin, sending shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain pelting the windows, her emerald eyes locking with his in the flickering lamplight as he slowly peeled away the drenched fabric. What neither of them knew was that hidden beneath the floorboards of this very room lay the key to saving Gideon's ranch from the ruthless banker who would seize it at dawn, while Lila Mae carried secrets about that same treasure that could either be his salvation or lead them both to ruin. As distant hoofbeats echoed through the storm, growing closer with each passing second, would this moment of unexpected intimacy be their first step toward love and redemption? Or had fate conspired to destroy them both before the sun could rise? The scorching sun beat down on Dusty Creek's main street as Gideon Blake stood outside the First National Bank. Sweat dripped from his weathered brow, his calloused hands clenched into fists at his sides. Clayton Riggs emerged from the bank's heavy wooden doors. His expensive suit contrasted sharply with the dusty frontier town. A cold smile spread across his face as he spotted Gideon. "Blake, your time's up." Riggs pulled out a crisp document. 30 days to settle your debt, or the ranch becomes mine. Gideon's jaw tightened. The Blake family ranch had been in his bloodline for 3 generations. His father's journal, filled with cryptic notes about hidden treasure on their land, felt heavy in his vest pocket. Every search had turned up nothing but dirt and disappointment. "You'll get your money," Gideon said through gritted teeth. Riggs laughed. The sound echoed off the nearby storefronts. Several townspeople stopped to watch the confrontation unfold. Heat crept up Gideon's neck as whispers spread among the gathering crowd. Inside the Silver Dollar Saloon, Lila Mae Carter paused her vocal warm-up. Through the batwing doors, she observed the heated exchange. Her emerald eyes studied Gideon's defiant stance. Something stirred in her chest. She recognized that look of desperate determination. Her own brother had worn the same expression before vanishing into the wilderness 3 years ago. He'd been searching for the same legend that haunted these parts, stories of gold hidden in the hills surrounding Dusty Creek. Riggs tucked the foreclosure notice back into his jacket. 30 days, Blake. Not a day more. The banker strode away, leaving Gideon standing alone in the street. The crowd slowly dispersed. Shame burned in his chest as he headed toward the saloon. Lila Mae watched him approach. Her fingers traced the rim of her whiskey glass. Tonight, she would make her move. The whiskey burned Gideon's throat as he sat hunched over the bar. The Silver Dollar Saloon buzzed with evening chatter, but the conversations felt distant. His father's journal lay open before him, its yellowed pages filled with sketches of rock formations and compass directions that led nowhere. Lila Mae's voice drifted across the smoky room. Her haunting melody spoke of lost love and broken dreams. Gideon found himself listening, despite his troubles. When the song ended, scattered applause filled the silence. She approached his table with graceful steps. Her emerald dress swayed with each movement. Without invitation, she slid into the chair across from him. "Rough day," she said, signaling the bartender for 2 whiskeys. Gideon closed the journal quickly. "Nothing I can't handle. Clayton Riggs is a snake." She accepted her drink with steady hands. "He's been circling wounded prey all over this territory." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Dark clouds gathered beyond the saloon's dusty windows. The first drops of rain began pattering against the glass. Gideon studied her face. Most folks in Dusty Creek kept their distance from his troubles. Banks foreclosed on ranches every month. It was common as tumbleweeds. "Why do you care?" Lila Mae sipped her whiskey. The amber liquid caught the lamplight. "Maybe I don't like seeing good men get crushed by vultures." Lightning illuminated the street outside. The storm was moving fast. Gideon remembered the long ride back to his ranch. The dirt roads would turn to mud within the hour. "I should head home before this gets worse." He tucked the journal inside his vest. "That's a dangerous ride in weather like this." Lila Mae's fingers drummed against the wooden table. I've heard stories about flash floods washing out the creek crossings. More thunder shook the building. Rain began falling harder, creating steady streams down the windows. Other patrons glanced nervously toward the doors. Gideon pushed back his chair. The ranch won't tend itself. Wait, she stood as well. I have a horse at the livery. Maybe I could ride out with you. Make sure you get home safe. Something flickered in her eyes, a hidden urgency that made Gideon pause. He'd seen her around town for months, but she'd never shown interest in his welfare before. Why would a saloon singer risk getting soaked for a failing rancher? Maybe I'm more than just a singer. The cryptic response sent questions racing through his mind. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind howled between the buildings. The saloon's bat-wing doors rattled against their hinges. 20 minutes later, they rode side by side through the driving rain. Lila May sat her horse like someone born to the saddle. Her hood pulled low against the weather, but Gideon caught glimpses of her determined expression. Lightning split the sky as they reached the ranch house. The modest structure stood dark against the storm. Gideon's few remaining cattle had taken shelter in the barn. Their destination felt both welcoming and lonely. They tied their horses under the covered porch. Rain had soaked through both their coats. Lila May shivered as Gideon fumbled with the door latch. Inside, he lit an oil lamp. Golden light pushed back the darkness. The main room was simple but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. His father's old furniture filled the space with memories. You can wait here until the storm passes. Gideon moved to start a fire. Should blow over by morning. Lila May removed her dripping coat. Underneath, her dress clung to her frame. She wrung water from her long, dark hair. Your father was Samuel Blake. It wasn't a question. Gideon's hand stilled on the kindling. Few people mentioned his father anymore. The old man had died 2 winters ago, taking his secrets with him. You knew him? I knew of him. She moved closer to the growing flames. He used to come into town asking strange questions. About the old mining claims. About families who'd lived here before the railroad came through. Gideon's pulse quickened. His father had indeed spent his final years obsessed with local history. The journal contained dozens of interviews with elderly settlers. Most folks had dismissed it as the rambling of a man losing his grip on reality. What kind of questions? About treasure, about things hidden in the hills. Lila May's voice grew softer. About people who'd disappeared looking for something valuable. The fire crackled to life. Warmth began spreading through the room. Outside, the storm showed no signs of weakening. Thunder continued rolling across the valley. Gideon pulled out his father's journal. He'd never shown it to another soul. The pages contained his father's legacy and his own source of endless frustration. He left me this. Maps and riddles that don't lead anywhere. He set the worn book on the table between them. I've spent 2 years chasing ghosts. Lila May approached slowly, her eyes fixed on the journal with unmistakable recognition. When she reached for it, her hands trembled slightly. May I? He nodded. She opened to the first page. Her fingers traced the faded ink. Something in her expression shifted. Knowledge flickered behind her emerald eyes. These aren't just random notes, she whispered. What do you mean? She looked up at him. Rain continued pelting the windows. The lamp flame danced between them, casting shifting shadows across her face. I mean, your father was closer to the truth than anyone realized. Lila May's words hung in the air like smoke. Gideon studied her face in the flickering lamplight. The storm outside seemed to press against the windows with increased fury. What do you know about my father's work? She turned another page of the journal. Her fingers stopped on a sketch of a distinctive rock formation. 3 standing stones arranged in a triangle. Below it, his father had written compass bearings and cryptic symbols. I know he wasn't the first person to look for what's hidden out there. Lila May's voice carried a weight of old pain. My brother Thomas was obsessed with the same stories, the same legends. Gideon leaned forward. Your brother? He disappeared 3 years ago. She closed the journal carefully, left town one morning with supplies for a week. Never came back. Lightning illuminated the room through the windows. Thunder followed immediately after. The storm was directly overhead now. Wind rattled the door in its frame. "People go missing in the wilderness all the time," Gideon said gently. "Not Thomas." Her eyes flashed with certainty. "He grew up in these mountains, knew every trail and water source for 50 miles. He wouldn't have gotten lost." She moved to the window and peered out at the rain. Her reflection ghosted in the glass. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible above the storm. "He found something before he vanished. Sent me a letter 2 days before he disappeared. Said he'd discovered proof that the treasure was real." Gideon's heart quickened. "What kind of proof?" "A map, hidden in the old Spanish mission ruins 20 miles south." She turned back to face him. "Thomas copied part of it before someone scared him off." "Someone?" He wouldn't say who. Just wrote that powerful people didn't want the truth coming to light. Lila May hugged her arms around herself. "Said if anything happened to him, I should find Samuel Blake's son." The implications struck Gideon like physical blows. His father had died suddenly of a heart attack. No warning signs. The doctor had called it natural causes, but now questions formed in his mind. "You think someone killed Thomas?" "I think my brother got too close to something valuable, something worth killing for." She returned to the table. "Your father's journal contains the same landmarks Thomas described in his final letter." Gideon opened the journal to a map his father had drawn. The 3 standing stones appeared again, along with measurements to various geographical features. A creek bed, an old mine shaft, a grove of twisted oak trees. "Thomas wrote about these exact same markers," Lila May continued. "He said they formed a pattern, like breadcrumbs leading to the real prize. Why come to me now? Why not search for it yourself?" She was quiet for a long moment. Rain continued drumming against the roof. The fire popped and crackled in the hearth. "Because I tried." Her admission came out barely above a whisper. 6 months after Thomas vanished, I rode out to those ruins. Found where he'd camped. Found signs of a struggle." "What kind of signs?" "Torn canvas, scattered supplies, horse tracks from multiple riders." She sat down heavily. Someone had been watching him, waiting for the right moment. Gideon felt cold despite the fire's warmth. The pieces were falling into place. His father's sudden obsession with local history. The late-night rides he'd claimed were to check on cattle. The locked drawer in his desk that Gideon had never been able to open. "You think the same people killed my father. I think your father got close to the truth, just like Thomas did." Lila May leaned across the table. "But together, we might have enough information to succeed where they failed." Thunder crashed overhead. The lamp flame guttered in a sudden draft. For a moment, darkness threatened to swallow the room before the light steadied again. Gideon studied the woman across from him. Her beauty was undeniable, but something deeper drew him to her cause. A shared purpose. A chance for justice. "What exactly are we talking about here? Gold? Silver?" "According to the Spanish records Thomas found, it's more than precious metals." Her eyes gleamed with possibilities. "The mission priests hid a fortune in religious artifacts when the Mexican government started seizing church property. Solid gold crosses, jeweled chalices, items worth enough to buy half the territory. And you believe it's still out there." "I believe powerful people think it's still out there. Powerful enough to kill anyone who gets too close." She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. "Your ranch sits right in the middle of the search area. That's why Clayton Riggs wants your land so badly." The revelation hit Gideon like a lightning bolt. Riggs hadn't been targeting him randomly. The foreclosure wasn't just business, it was strategic. "He knows about the treasure. I'd bet my life on it." Lila May squeezed his hand. "Question is, are you willing to bet yours to stop him?" Outside, the storm showed no signs of weakening. They were trapped together until morning. trapped with dangerous knowledge and limited time. Gideon looked down at their joined hands. Her skin was soft against his weathered palms. For the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone in his struggles. If we do this, there's no going back. There's already no going back, she replied. For either of us. Dawn broke gray and cloudy over the ranch. The storm had passed, leaving puddles scattered across the yard. Gideon and Lila May stood over his father's journal, comparing notes she'd retrieved from her saddlebags. Thomas Carter's letter was written in hurried script. The ink had smudged in places, but the message was clear. The 3 standing stones marked the entrance to an underground passage. Spanish priests had used natural caves to hide their treasures during the political upheavals of the 1820s. The measurements match, Gideon said, tracing his finger across both documents. Your brother found the same landmarks my father mapped. Lila May nodded toward the barn. The stones are less than a mile from here. Thomas wrote that the entrance lies beneath the easternmost pillar. They saddled their horses as morning mist clung to the valley. The air smelled of wet earth and sagebrush. Gideon packed rope, lanterns, and tools from his father's workshop. Whatever lay hidden below ground had waited decades. It could wait a few more hours for proper preparation. The ride took them through rolling hills dotted with scrub oak. Cattle trails wound between rocky outcroppings. Gideon had ridden this land countless times but never paid attention to the ancient stone markers his father had sketched so carefully. The 3 pillars rose from a natural clearing. Each stood nearly 10 feet tall. Weather had carved deep grooves in their surfaces. Primitive symbols marked their bases, worn almost smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Spanish missionaries didn't carve these, Gideon observed, dismounting near the eastern stone. These are older, much older. Lila May studied the weathered symbols. Thomas thought they were Apache markers. The priests just used existing landmarks to hide their treasure. They searched around the base of the eastern pillar. Generations of fallen leaves had created thick mulch. Gideon's shovel struck something solid 2 feet down, not rock, wood. Working together, they cleared away decades of debris. A wooden trapdoor emerged from the earth. Iron hinges had rusted nearly through, but the thick planks remained intact. Gideon pried it open with a crowbar. Darkness yawned beneath. Cool air drifted up from the depths. The smell of old stone and mineral deposits filled their nostrils. Thomas was right, Lila May whispered. They lit lanterns and descended rough stone steps. The passage had been carved from living rock. Tool marks scarred the walls. Their footsteps echoed in the confined space. 20 feet down, the stairs opened into a natural cavern. Multiple tunnels branched off in different directions. Someone had placed wooden support beams at key points. Recent work, not Spanish colonial. Someone's been maintaining this place, Gideon said, holding his lantern high. Lila May examined fresh chisel marks on the cave wall. Thomas mentioned hearing voices down here, men talking about excavation schedules. A sound echoed from deeper in the tunnel system. Footsteps on stone. Multiple sets, moving with purpose. Gideon grabbed Lila May's arm and pulled her behind a natural rock formation. 3 men emerged from the western passage. They carried mining equipment and surveying tools. Lantern light revealed faces Gideon recognized from town. Clayton Riggs' hired hands. "Boss wants this section cleared by week's end," the first man said. His voice bounced off the cavern walls. "Says the Blake property will be ours soon enough. What about the girl asking questions?" The second man spat tobacco juice onto the stone floor. "She's been sniffing around just like her brother did. Riggs says she'll stop asking questions real soon." The third man laughed coldly. Same way her brother stopped. Gideon felt Lila May tense beside him, her worst fears confirmed by casual conversation. These men had killed Thomas Carter. Now they planned to eliminate her as well. The hired hands continued deeper into the tunnel system. Their voices faded as they moved toward what sounded like active excavation. Pickaxe strikes echoed from the darkness. "They've been working down here for months," Lila May breathed. "While you struggled to save your ranch, Riggs was already mining the treasure beneath it." Gideon's anger burned cold and focused. His father had died protecting this secret. Thomas Carter had died seeking justice. Now Clayton Riggs planned to steal everything and eliminate the witnesses. They followed the Western Passage carefully. The tunnel sloped downward for several hundred yards before opening into a vast underground chamber. Lantern light revealed the scope of Riggs's operation. Wooden scaffolding supported the excavation. Cart tracks led from deeper chambers to a mechanical lift system. Crates lined the walls, filled with artifacts and precious metals. The Spanish treasure was real, and Riggs had been systematically looting it. "There's enough wealth here to buy half the territory," Lila May whispered. A rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. Not mining equipment. Something heavier, more deliberate. The wooden supports creaked ominously. Dust rained from the ceiling. Small rocks began falling. The rumbling grew louder. "Cave in!" Gideon shouted. The ceiling collapsed behind them. Tons of rock and earth sealed the passage they'd used to enter. More supports snapped under the shifting weight. The entire chamber shuddered. Emergency lanterns flickered to life throughout the excavation. Riggs's men emerged from side tunnels, shouting orders and searching for escape routes. In the chaos, Gideon realized the truth. This was no accident. Someone had triggered the collapse deliberately. Someone who knew they were down here. Someone who wanted them buried alive with the treasure. Dust choked the air as rocks continued falling. Gideon grabbed Lila May's hand and pulled her toward the eastern wall. A narrow gap between fallen timbers offered temporary shelter from the collapsing ceiling. "Stay low!" he shouted over the rumbling. Riggs' hired men scrambled in different directions. One dove under the wooden scaffolding. Another pressed himself against the cavern wall. The third man wasn't fast enough. A support beam caught him across the shoulder, pinning him beneath splintered wood. The cave-in lasted 30 seconds, but felt like hours. When the dust finally settled, emergency lanterns cast eerie shadows across the transformed chamber. Half the ceiling had collapsed. Their original entrance was completely blocked. Gideon assessed their situation with practiced calm. 20 years of ranch work had taught him to think clearly during emergencies. Panicking cattle, flash floods, equipment failures. This was bigger, but the principles remained the same. "Count the exits," he told Lila May quietly. She understood immediately. 3 tunnels remained accessible. The western passage where Riggs' men had emerged. A narrow opening near the treasure crates that might lead to natural caves. The lift shaft they'd seen earlier, though the mechanical system looked damaged. "The lift won't hold our weight now," she whispered. "Those support cables are frayed." One of Riggs' men freed himself from the debris. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead. He spotted Gideon and Lila May crouched behind the fallen timber. "You!" He pointed an accusing finger. "This is your fault somehow." The accusation drew attention from the other survivors. 2 more hired hands turned toward them. Their faces showed fear mixed with anger. Trapped men looking for someone to blame. Gideon stood slowly. His father had taught him that showing weakness invited trouble. Even in desperate situations, confidence could be the difference between life and death. "We didn't cause the cave-in," he said firmly. "But I know these hills better than anyone. Better than you city boys working for Riggs." "City boys?" the bleeding man sneered. "I've been mining these tunnels for 6 months." "Mining someone else's land," Lila May added, rising beside Gideon. "Stealing treasure that doesn't belong to Clayton Riggs." Her words struck home. The men exchanged uncomfortable glances. They knew they were criminals, getting paid well for it, but criminals nonetheless. Gideon pressed his advantage. "Right now, we all have the same problem. Getting out of here alive. You can settle your legal troubles with the sheriff later." A grinding sound echoed from deeper in the chamber. More rocks shifted somewhere in the darkness. The cave system wasn't stable. Additional collapses could happen at any moment. "The narrow tunnel," Lila May said, studying their options. "It heads east toward the original entrance. Might connect to natural caves that lead to the surface." Gideon examined the opening she'd indicated. Barely wide enough for one person, the kind of tight space that made grown men panic. But it showed signs of air movement, which suggested an eventual exit. I'll go first, he decided. Test the route. Like hell, one of Riggs's men interrupted. You could seal us in on purpose. The bleeding man stepped forward aggressively. His hand moved toward the pistol at his hip. Gideon tensed, ready to fight if necessary. Wait. Lila May moved between them gracefully. There's something you should know about me. Her voice carried a different tone now, confident in a way that commanded attention. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small leather portfolio. Before I became a saloon singer, I worked for traveling shows, circuses mostly. She opened the portfolio to reveal newspaper clippings and promotional photographs. I was an escape artist. The images showed a younger Lila May in elaborate costumes. Headlines advertised The Amazing Miss Carter and her death-defying escapes from locked boxes, chains, and underground chambers. My brother Thomas taught me everything he knew about tight spaces and emergency exits. She tucked the portfolio away, including how to navigate cave systems safely. Gideon stared at her with new understanding. Her calm demeanor during the crisis made sense now. This wasn't her first dangerous situation involving confined spaces and limited time. The circus went broke 2 years ago, she continued. Thomas and I came west looking for a fresh start. That's when he became obsessed with treasure hunting. One of Riggs's men laughed nervously. So you're some kind of professional escape artist? Was. Now I'm someone who wants out of this death trap. She moved toward the narrow tunnel opening. And I'm your best chance of finding a safe route to the surface. Another grinding sound echoed through the chamber. Dust drifted down from unstable ceiling areas. Time was running out. Fine, the bleeding man said grudgingly. But the cowboy goes with you. Insurance. Gideon nodded. He understood the logic, even if he didn't like being used as collateral. Together, he and Lila May represented their best hope for escape and their best guarantee against betrayal. She studied the tunnel entrance with professional eyes, tested the airflow direction, checked for signs of structural weakness in the surrounding rock. It's tight, but manageable, she announced. Probably connects to the cave system that runs under the whole valley. She entered the tunnel first, moving with fluid confidence. Gideon followed, impressed by her technique. She'd definitely done this before. Behind them, Riggs's men argued about who would go next. Fear made men stupid. Gideon had seen it countless times. The tunnel stretched ahead into darkness. Their only light came from a single lantern Lila May carried. But for the first time since the cave-in, Gideon felt hopeful. They were going to survive this. The narrow tunnel stretched for what felt like miles. Lila May moved with practiced efficiency, testing each section before committing her weight. Behind them, Riggs's men followed in grudging silence. The bleeding had stopped, but their tempers remained short. After 20 minutes of crawling, the passage opened into a natural cave system. Underground streams had carved elaborate chambers over thousands of years. Their lantern light revealed multiple exits leading in different directions. Which way? Gideon asked. Lila May knelt beside the largest stream. She cupped water in her palm and tasted it carefully. Fresh. No mineral taste. This flows toward the valley floor. They followed the stream through winding passages. The sound of running water masked their footsteps, but it also concealed other sounds. When they finally emerged into daylight, 3 hours had passed since the cave-in. The exit lay hidden behind a waterfall on Gideon's property, less than half a mile from his ranch house. They'd been walking in circles underground while searching for treasure that had always been beneath his feet. Riggs' men stumbled into the sunlight, squinting and disoriented. The bleeding man looked around with growing recognition. This was Blake Land. They were trespassing with witnesses present. Now what? He demanded. Now you walk away, Gideon said firmly. Tell Clayton Riggs his mining operation is finished. The man's hand drifted toward his pistol again. Gideon tensed, ready for violence. But Lila May stepped forward with surprising authority. I wouldn't do that if I were you. She pulled a folded document from her coat. The paper looked official, complete with legal seals and signatures. Gideon couldn't read the details from where he stood, but the effect on Riggs' men was immediate. What is that? the bleeding man asked suspiciously. A deed transfer, Lila May replied calmly. Signed this morning by Judge Morrison in the county courthouse. This land now belongs to the Carter-Blake Mining Partnership. Gideon stared at her in shock. When had she arranged such paperwork? How had she managed legal documents while they were trapped underground? The bleeding man snatched the deed from her hands. His eyes widened as he read the official language. The document appeared genuine, complete with current date stamps and witness signatures. "This is impossible," he sputtered. "Riggs owns Blake's debt. The foreclosure is legal." "Not anymore," Lila May said with a satisfied smile. "It seems someone made an anonymous payment to the First National Bank this morning, enough to satisfy all outstanding obligations plus penalties." The first twist hit Gideon like a physical blow. Someone had saved his ranch while he was underground. Someone with enough money to pay off Clayton Riggs and enough influence to arrange immediate deed transfers. "Who paid the debt?" he asked. Lila May's smile widened. "I did, using treasure Thomas found before he disappeared." She reached into her saddlebag and produced a small leather pouch. Gold coins spilled into her palm when she opened it. Spanish colonial currency, worth a fortune to collectors and historians. "My brother wasn't killed for getting too close to the treasure," she explained. "He was killed for finding it, but not before he hid a cache of artifacts in our old family cabin." The second twist revealed itself as the pieces fell into place. Thomas Carter had succeeded in his quest. He'd discovered Spanish gold and hidden it from the people hunting him, but they'd killed him anyway to prevent him from revealing the treasure's location. "You've known where the gold was all along," Gideon realized. "Some of it, yes. Enough to save your ranch and fund our partnership." She gestured toward the waterfall behind them. "But there's much more down in those caves, more than Clayton Riggs ever imagined." Riggs' men exchanged nervous glances. Their employer's secret operation had been exposed. Their illegal mining activities could land them in territorial prison. Staying to fight would only make their legal problems worse. "This isn't over," the bleeding man warned. "Riggs won't give up easy." "Tell Clayton he can discuss his concerns with Sheriff Watson," Lila May replied. "I'm sure the sheriff will be very interested in his unauthorized mining operation." The hired hands retreated toward town on foot. Their horses had been left near the original cave entrance, now blocked by tons of fallen rock. It would be a long, uncomfortable walk back to Dusty Creek. Gideon and Lila May watched them disappear over the hills. The immediate danger had passed, but questions remained. Trust had been built on shared peril, but secrets had been revealed that changed everything. "Why didn't you tell me you already had the gold?" he asked. "Because I needed to know if you were trustworthy," she admitted. "Thomas died because he trusted the wrong person. I couldn't make that mistake." "And now?" She stepped closer, her emerald eyes reflecting the afternoon sunlight. "Now I know you're worth trusting, worth partnering with, worth more than just a business arrangement." Their lips met beside the waterfall. The kiss tasted of adventure and new beginnings. When they finally broke apart, Gideon realized his life had changed completely in less than 2 days. The ranch was saved. The treasure was real. Clayton Riggs would face justice for Thomas Carter's murder. And Lila May Carter had chosen to share her future with a struggling rancher who'd found his fortune in the most unexpected way. And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.